If you like my videos, please like, comment, which helps the algorithm, subscribe, and share. Now that the politicians and the media are gone, it's one of the only ways that we can shed a light on our little town of East Palestine. And consider joining our Facebook group, East Palestine Off the Rails. Get the truth from people that live here. And when I get a little too dicey for YouTube, you can check me out on Rumble as Phoenix on the Sword. That's Phoenix on the Sword. And please check out our GoFundMe account, East Palestine Off the Rails. We set a lofty goal to help people move out that choose to do so. No one here has gotten any federal financial help, and many people are desperate to move out of the chemical-laden land. No donation is too small. Thank you so much for caring, and enjoy the video. Okay, I am sitting here with Krissy Hylton, and she is an East Palestine resident. I told myself I was just going to take it easy today. But then I got up and I contacted Krissy. We were supposed to do an interview last week, and then something happened. We weren't able to do it. And so I contacted her, and she said, hey, how about 12? And I think I contacted her at 11:45. I don't know what it was. And I'm like, oh, crap. Okay, so, but, you know, this whole thing has disrupted our lives. We're doing things now that we normally would not, taking up our day. So we're here to share Krissy's story today, and nice to see you today.
Nice to see you too.
Okay.
Wish it wasn't over this. But.
Yeah. Now, I've seen you on other interviews, and you live. Go ahead and tell me where you live.
Ground Zero. I live on East Rebecca Street. The night of the derailment, I'm right close to Family Dollar. So I had walked up when I heard there was a derailment, and I got to the actual, like by the dumpsters and the smell.
Keep that thought for a second. Family Dollar, most people aren't going to know where that is in relation to, you know, people watching this in relation to the derailment. Family Dollar is probably how far? It's just a stretch of road till you get to the derailment. How far would you estimate? If that,
maybe half mile, maybe.
Yeah, maybe half mile, maybe quarter mile, maybe half mile.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're about a half mile.
So I went up and I could see smoke and the fire, and I thought one of the plants was on fire. I mean, it was so close and so much smoke. And I stood there for just long enough to take 2-3 pictures. And the burning, my eyes, my throat, I had to put my jacket up over my face. Thought, I got to get out of here. So I went back to the house. And I had yet to hear anything except my daughter had seen on Facebook that there was a train derailment.
Mm-hmm. So you're still talking about the actual derailment, not the chemical bomb.
Yes. Not the chemical bomb.
So this was Friday night wasn't it around 9 o'clock or so?
Yeah. Well, it was about 9:30, 9:45 when we first heard. We heard sirens, lots of sirens, but didn't know what was going on. So we went ahead. I went up, I got the pictures, I came back, I figured I'm going to call the police station. So I called the non-emergency number and I asked, is Rebecca Street okay? No, get out. You're being evacuated. So I had to wake up my mother and my stepfather, and he's 89 and she'll be 82. Wow. That was a really cold night in February.
Yeah.
And I had to warm up the car. I had to grab their medicine. She has Parkinson's, COPD, and he has start of dementia.
Is she pretty mobile at this point? She's still
right
pretty
now,
mobile?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, really blessed. She's able. She walks with a cane. She does have days where her balance is off a little bit, and I worry about that. But I just was worried about having to wake her up from a dead sleep because she had slept through the sirens. And my daughter and her boyfriend had decided they were going to go to his grandmother's in Patterson and take our 2 dogs. So then my husband and I got my mom and stepdad into the car. He decided to take the truck, follow us. We were getting out of town. You had to pull over every 5 feet for first responders coming by.
Oh, okay.
So it took
Yeah, I
what
believe.
seemed like forever to get up to Columbiana to stay at the Best Western. And
And for those of you that don't know, I believe that night there were over 70 fire departments, not 70 firemen. I know there were over 60 fire departments that came on the
yeah,
scene that night.
yeah,
And
and
that's a lot of.
Poland, they were coming from Salem way, Columbiana way. I mean, everybody that had to leave that evacuated was dealing with having to pull over to let the first responders through, and they were flying. So you knew how serious it was
At that
by
point,
how many fire trucks and ambulance were coming.
could you smell anything while you were pulled
Yes.
over?
Yes, you could smell it clear up in Unity at
So
that
it
point.
being that cold, did you turn your heater off so it wouldn't bring things in?
No,
Okay.
I didn't think
Okay.
of that.
Yeah.
I left the heater on in my house, the
Mm,
furnace. Didn't even lock my door that night.
yeah.
I was just trying to get them to safety. And we got to a hotel. We were lucky enough to get one of the last rooms. People were calling, it was filling up real fast. The financial burden the next day, we had seen where people were back in town or hadn't even left. So we thought we would go into town and see, because it is a lot when you're buying multiple rooms and you're not planning on
Yeah.
a hotel
Yeah.
stay. That money has to come out of your bill money or something. So we drove back, my husband and I drove back into town, and people were walking around. Their business was open. So
What
we
time
went.
was this approximately?
This was before checkout, so about 11 a.m.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had went to work. But at that time, we didn't know what to think, and we didn't think about it too much. We knew we saw a big fire, and then I went to work the next day in Darlington, and I could smell it there, and it was coming over, our way.
Yeah.
So I could smell, and my staff was there, and that was the morning that I treated a first responder. And I know I mentioned this in another comment in another interview, but I asked him. I said, at that time there was nothing released about what was on fire, and I asked him, hey, there's rumors that there was maybe some chemicals or vinyl chloride on there. And he said, vinyl chloride's the least of your worries on that train. There are so many chemicals on there. And we weren't told till Sunday night, possibly, there was vinyl chloride. And then we weren't told for days and days and days there were other chemicals. So you came back in town, and you and your husband you
Well,
saw people walking around and
yeah.
businesses open.
So I wanted to lock the door. I had realized that I left without locking the door. So we went into the house, and it stunk in town. Horrible. But in my house, there wasn't an odor yet. So we thought, well, we just keep the doors shut, the windows shut, don't go outside. Evidently, it's safe to see so many people in town walking around and staying home, didn't evacuate. Things were coming on Facebook, but there were so many rumors that gas stations blew up and different things like that.
Can I say something real quick? And we'll get right back to that. When you said, you saw other people walking around, must be safe, right?
Yeah.
Well, every week I keep telling myself I'm going to stay out of the creeks, because every time I do, it feels like I was swimming in a pool where somebody put way too much chlorine in it, and my throat and my chest burns. And I was in the other night. I was going to stay out, but something the EPA said pissed me off so bad that that's what drags me back in. I was still going to stay out. And then stupidly, I see there were 6 EPA people taking, samples, no respirators, no nothing. And in my mind, I'm saying, even after all this, I've been hurt with the lungs many times in the creek.
Yes.
You know what I said to myself? I said what you just said. I said, there's 6 APA guys in there. Maybe it's safe.
Yeah.
And then I go in and prod around, and it's like the worst chemical spill or disaster from the creek banks.
Yes.
So when you see people and you see them walking around, we put our own safety at risk because we're looking and we see, hey, well, there's other people that are walking in this smell. Maybe I should too. Maybe it's okay. Sorry.
Yeah. And
What about that would make you possibly tear up? Are you just thinking
just
memories?
putting my family at risk.
Yeah.
Should have stayed gone. Should have never went back.
You guys will be okay. Everybody will be okay. I tell people that I've interviewed, it's usually both the exposure over duration. I don't know. We'll get to whether you're in town or not. I don't know if you are, but it's the continued contamination, the continued exposure that really amplifies your risk. And I should learn that. But you guys will be okay. So you and your husband, you went into your house and smelled okay at that point.
Yeah, you couldn't smell that smell that you got outside. It seemed fine. So my daughter, the dogs had been acting up. So they wanted to get the dogs back home and away from his grandmother's house because they just are some wild puppies. And they wanted to come back home. I wanted to see her, make sure she was safe. Just when you're separated from your child, that's rough. So
Keep going. It's just checking.
So we went ahead and we went and picked my mom and my stepdad up. We brought them back home. I have an upstairs. I have the whole upstairs of the house has the kitchen, the living room, bedroom, bathrooms. And then she has hers is all on the first floor. So I actually would not open her doors downstairs. If I had to leave to get groceries, I would leave through my exit upstairs. So I would not be letting anything in.
No.
You have that false sense of security. Like, well, smoke rises, it's going to be worse upstairs. Okay. We'll just use the upstairs door to protect her.
Got it. I was wondering what your thinking process was.
Yeah. And you're just like in denial, I guess, and in shock. I've lived in that house all my life.
Yeah.
We've had trains. When my stepfather came, I remember him trying to get used to sleeping through the train whistles that went by every 3 to 8 minutes, it seems like. And then Sunday, we got a beat at the door. It was the sheriff that we had to leave again. So we this time went into Pennsylvania, into Chippewa. When we rented rooms there, they were pet friendly with the dogs, and at least we would all be together.
It's about 10 miles away. Yeah. 7 to 10 miles away.
Yeah. And I remember trying to find, you would hear about them doing that burn. And I thought at first it was supposed to happen at like 3:00 in the afternoon, noon, then 3. One car, the famous one car.
Yeah, at first they said, we want to do it as early in the morning as possible so the smoke rises as high as possible, because when it inverts with that spreading out, they wanted that as high as possible. Then something, I don't know, who knows what happened. It just kept being delayed and delayed and delayed. And everybody knows now that famous mushroom cloud right over Palestine doesn't look that high to me. No. And remember, the wind the first couple hours was zero. I mean, yes. It was zero, and it just hung over the town.
Yeah, we were in Chippewa when that happened, and we watched it outside of the hotel, and it looked like an atomic bomb. I just cried and cried. It didn't look like we would even have a town to go back to from the size of that. out, and it came out that it was 5 cars. We were still for days waiting to see what was even in the cars. I was when they lifted the evacuation order, I was dumbfounded by that.
Mm.
To this day, why would you not have did the testing and the joke of the cleaning? They sprayed for COVID in houses. I sat in a hotel for 9.5 hours calling all over the country trying to find a company that could clean up hazardous chemicals in a residential home.
I don't know enough about this to speak about this, but I do know just my age. You've been through a lot, and you see people try to remediate and clean. I honestly don't know if you can clean every fiber of your house, these chemicals out of your house. But let's talk about that for a moment, because I think most people that aren't from around here have no idea how backward this was. They did not test first.
No.
They brought us back first. And then, if you can call it testing, then they slowly roll out this testing while the lab rats are in the cages, right?
Yeah.
So we're in this place before they even test.
Yes.
Like, what made them? Well, I know the EPA said after 3 days the air was safe. You do know that, maybe you don't know this. After 9/11, the EPA said, I'll have to it's either the next day or a couple days later, they said the air was safe in 9/11, and they said the rubble was safe. And many of the first responders, and also, but the people that cleaned up the rubble, the EPA couldn't even detect asbestos, although the material was laden with asbestos. Many of those workers and the residents who live right around that area, close to the rubble, they're either dead or very sick, a large portion of them, with chronic lifetime illness because they stayed in that area afterward.
Yeah.
So when the EPA told us, or whoever it was that told us, hey, so it happened, they did the burn on Monday. Was that correct?
Yes.
If I remember.
It was
We came
Monday.
back, was it lifted Wednesday afternoon? I believe,
Yeah.
did we come back?
It was.
2.5 days,
Yeah.
whatever it might be. But I remember I didn't want to come back. And my wife's like, we got to go back home because you have that emotional attachment.
Yeah.
And as soon as we were packing up, you know what happened then with the trains, right? I mean, of course you do.
Yeah.
So right after the evacuation was lifted, the train started rolling through.
Minutes. I didn't go back.
Okay. Smart move.
Yeah. With my mother having Parkinson's at 81, and I was not chancing that. She has COPD. My daughter has asthma. I'm type 1 juvenile diabetic. I have been since I was 9. I prayed a lot, and God answered me not to go. It was a firm voice in my head saying, don't go. So I was one that was very aggressive. I would go to the EPA. I wanted the air tests done. The first air test was Super Bowl Sunday. And I had seen the company CTEH that was doing the air testing. I'd seen them in the parking lot at the church. And
so for those of you who don't know, Norfolk Southern contracted a lab that does their testing. And they're quite controversial because they had gotten in trouble in the past for
falsifying documents.
Yes.
When you research that company, that is the first thing that comes up is claim after claim after claim of falsification. BP
if that's the first
oil,
thing that comes up when you see that, why would a company want to use them?
Exactly. You'll have to remind me of that because I spoke with Alan Shaw in person about that. But when I seen them in the parking lot, because that's the command center, that was the command center at the Methodist Church across from the police station in East Palestine. So I would go there daily. I start work early and I would stand out in the hallway.
That's right. So you should let people know you work in East Palestine. I mean,
Yes, I
right,
can't
very
say
close. No,
where,
we won't
but
talk about
yes,
that, but
yes,
very close to the derailment and
yes,
very close to the railroad tracks.
yes.
There is
So,
another establishment across the street that you're probably glad you don't work in, because you could probably stick your hand out the window and touch the train.
yeah,
But you are
that's very, very close.
your work is very close to.
Yes.
So, okay.
So I had been going in daily and standing out in the hall when they were talking, because they would have the command center there for the railroad. The EPA was in the next room, and CTEH was in the room down from them. So you would see all three, and you would hear. It was unlocked. Nobody ever asked me what I was doing, so I would stand and listen. Um, I had asked how many homes they had tested that they received bad results. And she smiled at me and said, not one.
And this was who?
CTEH, a tester for them.
Okay, I thought maybe it go, yeah.
And I said, so all the houses that you've tested, because I had probably a week wait, I don't know, from the controlled burn to Super Bowl Sunday before I got an air test. But none of them, not one resident, had a bad test. So she smiled like that would be comforting to me. And that's when I realized they're not testing right. They're not testing for what they should be, or they're using the wrong instruments. But there is no way that you can go into your home for 10 minutes in my house, and you would have this tingle in your tongue, your nose, and your lips. Your eyes would burn. You would start very hacking cough, chest pain, lightheadedness. You would be off balance like you were drunk, but you weren't. That was just within 10 minutes. So they come to the house and they're accompanied to CTEH tester and an EPA that test. They have two different meters. So when they came up onto the porch, I said, you're going to walk into my house and you're going to smell a smell that is just so hard to describe other than chemical. What happened is the creek became polluted with the contents from the train. The creek runs under my backyard through an underground tunnel.
And most people won't even understand that. The creek runs through your yard under a tunnel.
Yes.
And which does along under a lot of our businesses.
Yes. I used to play in those tunnels as a kid. You could go down in and you could come out completely on the other side.
Man, that sounds awesome.
Of the town, underneath the main part of town, the main street of town. You could walk under it. And they had cracks in those tunnels when I was a kid. They've not been updated for a long time. And when that creek floods, what happens is the water comes up in my basement.
Wow.
So I've got the double whammy.
Wow, those chemicals, I mean, for my filming in the creeks, they're horrible in there. And that was coming into your basement.
It hadn't yet. It hasn't yet. It takes, that's when it floods on the streets. I remember that happening probably about 8 or 9 times.
Okay.
But the thing is I don't want to be home and have it happen again now.
So it's also very possible that those vapors are very strong, and it'll come up into your basement somehow. I'm wondering if your house, if some of it was entering through there. Is that? what
Yeah.
you're thinking?
Yes. We have that sandstone foundation. That home was placed there in 1930. It was actually at another location in East Palestine, and they moved it. So it's a very old home. And there was no doubt about it. It smelled exactly. You've been in that creek. You know the smell. My living room, the whole, I mean, it hits you as the minute you walk through the front door into the living room. It smells exactly like that creek.
And what did they say?
They said, well, if we notice the smell, we'll write that down on the paper. But by this time, a lot of residents have been posting their air test results, and it hadn't mentioned anything like that. So they went through the house.
Do you mean it hadn't mentioned a smell? Is that what you mean?
No smell, no elevated levels. Everything was basically the same. Everybody had 0.1s.
Okay.
Everything was fine. That's what they kept saying. So we got into my mother's bedroom and the laundry room, my mother and stepfather's bedroom, and the machines went off. And looking, and the tester from the company that is not trustworthy actually looks at him and says, I have a 2. And he looked at her, but I said that. She goes, I have a solid 2. She said, what do you have? I put her head down. She's like, what is it? It's not a 2. She said, what? Is it a 2.9? He said, no, it's a 2.3. What do you want me to do about it?
And who is this speaking?
An EPA.
Okay, that's the EPA?
Yes.
And the woman is with CTEH?
Yes.
Okay.
And she was more honest than them. So she said, well,
you're saying the EPA said, what do you want me to do about it?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're asking the
They're
CTEH
asking, yes, for guidance on what to do, because the reading is a high alarming level. It may be of a 0.2 and a 0.23, but I could tell, and I had prayed, God, send me someone, send me one of your people to do this test. So I could see by the look on her face, she was alarmed. They had already did that where you break the glass, and we knew that was fine. But that air test.
So what is this you're talking about?
It's a monitor that they carry, and it sends off alarms. Some people that had high readings, they told them it was because they had candles lit in that room before, and it leaves a residue. But she wasn't trying to explain that away. She said, I want you to call your supervisor. I'm calling mine. Well, he went into the other room, and I don't know what he said to his. And I could only hear her, yes, yes. The sulfur run runs under her home. So she hung up, and she said, we have a toxicologist coming, and we have the supervisor for the EPA coming to talk to you. I said, okay, thank you. And she said, you're welcome. They had another house that they had to go to test. So
hold that thought for a second. Sulphur Run is where this derailment was. Sulphur Run is a creek that runs adjacent right to the tracks right up there. Mm-hmm. And that is where, when it spilled and when the burn and all kind of stuff, is where,
when they were putting the fire out,
yes, all the chemicals and the foam and the water,
right into it.
Everything from that derailment is running from the creek under these people's homes in the city and the business and into the ground. I mean, let's not forget about that. But that's the creek that she's talking about.
Yes.
Okay, so then.
Well, then he comes down, the EPA gentleman. He was a shift supervisor for that night. And I was talking to him about those booms that they had placed. They were like a dam that they put in the creek to lift the chemical gases up to get them out of the water. And I was thinking, and I'm just winging it, trying to come up with a solution with them because nobody knew what to do. And they're supposed to be trained with things like this, and they didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So I said, what if you move those booms? Because they put them under the tunnel where the tunnel opens once it comes out of the tunnel past my backyard into an opening. So I thought if they would have moved it to the beginning of the tunnel, maybe my house wouldn't smell like gases.
Maybe catch it before it came
in.
Yeah.
Well, he said, well, we'll have to check into that. I'll talk to my supervisor tomorrow. And we'll get back to you on it. And he's like, well, it's Super Bowl Sunday. Where's a good place to watch the game? In Youngstown. I'm in Youngstown. Some of my crew's in Newcastle.
Good place
Some
to watch
a
the game would be in your laundry room for them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I thought he was just trying to take my mind off of
Absolutely.
it because I was very scared and upset.
That is a technique that they use. Not, I'm not just particularly
but
this
to keep
person.
me calm until they could get the answers, and felt like you were on the verge of a nervous breakdown at this point.
So
because
did they ever?
Was helping.
Did they always just leave those booms after the tunnel, or do they ever move them in front of the tunnel?
No. It turns out those booms should have never been close to a residential home.
And my guess is because as they put the booms there, the chemicals just back up. Is that correct, or is that incorrect?
Yeah, it backs up, it lifts it, it aerates it.
Yeah.
And they were gassing all the homes.
When you say boom, was it just a boom, or was there also an aerator involved?
There was an aerator.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So the aerators bring the water out of the creek, aerate, put it into the air, but it also brings it to the surface. The SVOCs from the bottom, and these one-use booms are supposed to replace them over and over again. So as it comes down, it catches those VOCs. Then they replace it and put another one there. So that makes sense that what you're talking about. I mean, that's a horrible situation to have those aerators. Right, it was right by your home.
Yeah. They were catching that as soon as it left my backyard through the tunnel. So the home was, like you said, when you're in it 10 minutes and you're having a serious reaction.
So what were you feeling at this point? You were going to visit. Were you getting symptoms as you were going?
Yeah, every day.
And what were some of those symptoms that you had?
The tingling in the tongue and the lips, coughing, chest pain, burning in my eyes, nose, throat. And then I said, like, my coordination would be off. I would catch myself stumbling.
Almost neurological.
Yes. Yeah. And with Mom having Parkinson's, there was no way I was going to bring her back to the house and only have her for a short time until those chemicals kicked it into high gear. So he's asking me this, and here comes the toxicologist. So I said to him, I'll talk to you when I'm done talking to her, right? Yeah. So she gets out of the car and
And I'm sorry, who is she? Because last we left off, you were talking to somebody about the boom and the Super Bowl.
Yes, so that was the supervisor of the EPA. So he waited talking about Super Bowl until CTEH's toxicologist come.
Okay.
So she come and she's like, I understand your concerns, but with these results, I just want to let you know that your home is safe. Well, I looked down at the paper because I was in shock with the whole calling of the supervisor things. And I looked, and my paper said all ones. They did not write
Are you
down.
serious?
I'm dead serious. I'm dead serious. My papers, and I still have them, I will send to you that you can add it to this interview. After all of that, after having a supervisor and a toxicologist come to my house, which they did not do for all of the other air testing, the residents, they're like, why'd you have one of them there? None
And
of them had one.
is it just your story against theirs, or was this recorded that those high levels were taken, that they were found?
There's a
I mean, you know who I
Facebook,
believe,
there's
but
a Facebook Live that I was doing. We lost sound on that Facebook Live because my daughter had grabbed the phone. Um, when she didn't know I was doing that, and because I did not say, I just wanted to do that, and I wasn't sure, and I wasn't going to. I just wanted to make sure everything went well. So you have sound at the beginning of it, and then as she takes, because I'm trying to sign a consent to test my house, she's like, "Mom, let me hold your phone." Then the sound went. So we kind of have to review. I think we can adjust that where you can see the two
okay.
in the 2-3.
Also,
But I do
did
have
you
my
kind of take
text
a picture of
messages.
the device with the when you're saying you can see the two or the?
No, but I do have a text conversation with the EPA after that.
Okay.
That he's like, well, I understand because it gets a little bit, I'll lead up to that.
Okay.
But the toxicologist says to me, it's like your home, it's almost like if you cut open an onion, your eyes may water, you may even sneeze, but
Good
you
Lord.
would have to eat a truckload of onions in one day to get sick from it. And the human body couldn't even afford a truckload of onions in a day. I would have my mom here without concern. I said, well, then you should probably call her, and you guys are welcome to stay. But I'm done talking to you about this. We're going to leave it at that. I'm not bringing my family home. So we wrapped up. She left, and I went outside to talk to him. And he must have found a place to watch the game because he had pulled away. So the next day, I spoke with the supervisor of the EPA that was there. And I explained, I had him come down, smell the house, um, the chemical smell. And then I asked him again if the supervisor that night had talked to him about the booms. And he said, well, unfortunately, we're not able to move those booms. He said, if we move them to the before your house, it may actually make it worse at your home level where your home's located. It may even intensify the smell that's filling up your house. So we were back to square one. Then I get a phone call from Rosemary. She is a secretary for Michael Regan, the head of the EPA in Washington. And he was flying into East Palestine, and he wanted to come to my home and do an air test. this is because I had said about why is the testing numbers different? And the supervisor said, well, you didn't have a hard 2 in 2-3, so that's why I didn't write it down. And I said, yes, I did. It has to stay that way for so many minutes. And if it doesn't, it could be that they walked past like something you wipe down with a Lysol wipe or a bleach wipe, and it would trigger those handheld devices.
So was it reading a 2 and a 2-3 for a
Yes.
while?
Yes, it
Okay.
was. And even if you recall what I said when she said, I have a hard 2. What do you have? There was no doubt. And my daughter was there with me. She witnessed it too. There was a sheriff in the hallway. They accompany you. They go with each EPA and CTEH to your home. So there is actually 3, and the neighbor was in the home, 4 against 2. That one being a law officer, that was a 2 and a 2-3.
Right.
So the supervisor said, when I said, no, that's not true, he's not telling you the truth. He did have a 2-3. It did last that long. His response, his text was, I understand. So then the federal EPA was coming. So at this point, I realized I wasn't getting the help, the answers from anybody that was there to help. They just were not doing it. I wanted to cover. I knew he was going to smell it. I did not want, they asked if he could bring a news crew with him. I said, certainly. But I thought then, if you want a news crew there, are you going to smile and tell me everything's okay? Because that's what the rest of the country thought. The only ones that knew the truth was the ones stuck in town. Yeah. And then we were being labeled as 15 minutes of fame, many things.
I've heard that so many times. Do you want to be doing this? Do you want to be like an interview? Wouldn't you rather just be home?
I want my life back.
Yes. Yeah,
I want my family's life back, and I want to make sure that we keep our health. This is the last thing I want to do. Yeah. I liked my normal, boring little life. I did. I lived in a small town for a reason.
You're making me tear up. So, did he come into town?
He did. He did. He came into town, and it happened to be that Senator Vance and Senator Brown and Representative Wilson was all, or Johnson,
Bill Johnson.
Yes, was all in town that day, and they were by the creek. Well, I knew the shortcut because they had security at the behind
Probably
them, and
the famous
and reporters at the front, and
is
you
that
couldn't
when
get up.
Vance put the stick in the creek? Probably that trip.
Day.
Yeah,
that trip. So I cut up between the alley and came up and went to touch one of them when they were talking to the news crew.
That's awesome.
And somebody says, hey, you can't, they're doing an interview. I'm like, I need them in my house, at my house in 5 minutes. I said, I really need them there. Well, it turns out here comes Fox News with the EPA head. And then here comes Sherrod Brown and Bill Johnson. They come in, and he looked a little shocked that they were there because they had wanted to know who was going to be in my home. They wanted names, phone numbers. I don't know if it's just for safety or...
The EPA wanted to know
that?
Okay.
Yes.
For Mr. Regan's trip? Or
yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, and it may be for releases for the news crew that was there. But I had my pastor from my church with me. She was in my home. The church secretary was at my home. We had prayed over the house before they came. And the first one, when I said, now I want everybody to acknowledge, what is the smell that you're smelling in my home? I said, does it smell like a chemical to you? Got both of them at the same time. Senator and congressman or representative. Yes, I smell it. I smell it. Even Fox News cameraman nodding his head. Morning Journal lady. Yes. So I look over at the EPA. I said, now, can you tell me if you can smell a chemical gas smell in my home? And he smiled and grabbed my hand and he said, just a little. Well, I'm glad I had everybody else there because it was more than just a little.
Yeah. That's the whole attitude of this whole thing has been, when I went down to the EPA center and talked to them, it was almost as if three of them ganged up on me. And I said, well, aren't you supposed to be looking out for us? It's almost like they're on Norfolk Southern side.
Yeah.
So that's been the whole thing through this whole catastrophe, this disaster.
Yes.
We're treated like children, and they think that we're just going to go away.
Yeah. Or they can tell us, compare a chemical to an onion.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you mentioned that did you actually talk to Alan Shaw?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you want to?
Yes, I did. He had planned, he had sent letters to pastors telling them that he wanted to meet with the pastors and some of the parishioners from the church. So I went, and he was asking what he could do to help the town thrive business-wise.
When you stop you there for a second, this just, I don't know why this occurred to me when I was interviewing somebody the other day. The husband was sitting off to the side and he talked about, how they're beautifying the park. It just occurred to me I know they did that, but shouldn't the people come first, the residents and their health and all their concerns? I made a joke of, when America's biggest chemical bomb goes off in your town, what you need to do is beautify the park.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me. So he was talking about how
he's in church,
and I understand businesses have to, it's tragic. But
and then we have a woman that's sitting there and she starts discussing her daughter's property value decreasing. And I know that's important. I know homeowners.
All these aspects are important.
They are.
But none of them, even those less important ones in health, aren't even being addressed.
So then I sat there and I'm by myself because I wouldn't sit with my pastor. I didn't want any negativity to go back to them. So I would not sit with anyone. I sat by myself. And I spoke up and I said, I raised my hand and he said, yes. And I said, I understand property value is okay. All right, it's okay to be worried about that. I said, and you're talking about what you can do to help East Palestine thrive, but why is no one worried about health? I said, I see kids with rashes every day when I'm in town. I look at their eyes when they're bloodshot or seeping pus. I'm like, why are we not focusing on the health effects and the people that are covered in rashes? Well, we have a clinic. I said, that clinic isn't doing anything.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah, they did nothing.
Well, in my opinion, they did more than nothing. So as a health professional, when someone comes into you, whether you think they are completely rational or irrational. Um, you have to take what they're telling you serious, and you do a protocol, you do appropriate testing, and
Yeah.
you make sure what the person is telling you is truly not the case or
Yeah.
is the case. And this was more of a like a denial clinic.
Yeah.
From and I haven't set foot in that clinic,
I
but
haven't either, but
everybody that I've talked to, yeah,
yes.
it's allergies, it's imagination, it's your
Yes.
stress. Yeah,
Stress.
yeah,
Stress will cause a rash.
yeah. But they certainly weren't doing chemical testing.
No. And they interfered and stopped that.
See, that I
I
don't know
I
about.
tried for months. I called my doctor that works for Mercy Health in Youngstown, and he can't find a way to write a script because Mercy Health Maine has removed it
Hmm.
where they can't.
And I can't fathom why that would be.
Yeah. Akron
And
Children's, another hospital that won't help the kids right now. They tell their patients there's no tests for that. 15 minutes later, in the same breath, well, the people that got that test has to pay thousands of dollars. Thought you didn't have a test.
yeah, and neither is true. But was that all Alan said?
Well, he said to me, well, yeah, there's the clinic there's the clinic. He's like, we have these tests, and I don't know what it's going to take. You don't believe the EPA for the air test. You don't believe CTEH for the air test. I don't know what it's going to take. You don't believe the railroad for you people to be convinced that it's safe. I said, well, I think if you would have, I said, my mom as a kid, if I was running with somebody that she didn't like, she would always say, run with trash, you're going to be associated as trash. That's what I told him. The CEO of the railroad in church, this is what I'm saying to him. I said, you want to talk about trust? You put our first responders in danger. You could have called, someone could have told them, what they were fighting.
You're telling me they don't have a manifest for that train?
No, it
Yeah.
disappeared.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
everything's disappeared.
So
We
when you
know
say
it's
running
been
with
stolen.
trash, you're talking about them hiring the company they hired.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
what I told him. I said, when you Google CTEH, I said, everything comes up falsification, falsification, falsification. I said, and you're going to say that we don't trust you? Of course, we don't trust you.
So
If you hired a reputable company,
mhm.
but you ran with trash, so you're trash.
So what may be a negative that so many of those articles come up on Google may be a positive to somebody else.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what are you doing? Where are you at now? What's going on in your life?
Well, we're still not home. I have to get a wiping done of the home after all of the pollutants is gone from the creek. And
So
that's the creek bed too.
you're going to get a wiping done in about 150 years.
Yeah,
So
150 years. So for right now.
where do you find out about this wiping? What about your duct work? The cleaning of the duct
we
work?
had that done. We had that done, and it's still the furnace filter within 2 weeks is totally black. The furnace is going to have to be replaced. They're going to have to gut the house and rebuild, and that's if they can clean up everything around it. That home is just too far gone. I'll never feel safe in it again. The railroad rented a home for my family because my mother wasn't moving enough at the hotel.
Okay.
For the Parkinson's,
yes.
And she wasn't walking, and I wasn't there. I was working. So 5 feet is what she would walk from the couch to the bathroom in a day. And she was getting weaker each day. So I kept calling. I have to get out of this hotel. I have to get her in a house. I need help.
Is that home nearby?
Columbiana.
Columbiana. Okay.
Columbiana.
your normal conveniences too, that if I grab something in my home or I need something, is that rough? I mean,
Yeah.
you're displaced.
Yeah.
How is that living?
Well, we were told that we would have to throw away any of our furniture, anything with fabric,
Who told you this?
all gone. The EPA.
Oh, wow. Wait a minute.
And then the railroad.
Wait a minute. Isn't that a contradiction? Why would you have to throw it away if they could barely smell chemicals and you didn't get a hard 2 hit? Why would?
Well, the railroad was happy to help with furniture. They knew. We're like, yeah, get rid of the fabric. We're advising people to get rid of fabric and just throw it away. I'm like, first thing I thought is my mom has a lift chair, as her couch is new, and if I set this outside to throw it away, what happens if somebody stops?
You're putting someone else's life in danger.
Yeah.
And isn't that, oh my gosh, what an analogy. It's almost so typical. Throw it away.
Yeah.
To them, it's not emotional.
No.
That you throw your belongings away. And that's kind of how they think about us. We're just
throwaways.
Yeah. Throw your stuff away.
Yeah.
We'll replace it with new stuff.
I have a love seat that was my great grandmother's, that when my grandmother passed away, it was given to me. Yeah, they just throw it away.
I don't want to end on this because I want to, sometimes one incident becomes a story, but that takes away from the real story. So I didn't even want to mention this, but I will mention it for people that have just watched my videos about this. Somewhere along the line, someone threw some kind of animal tongue on and presumably maybe that's because you were speaking out. Yeah. Not really, nobody knows, but just briefly, because I don't know, could have been nothing, could have been something. But
well, when the federal head of the EPA was at the home, I was so upset. I had tried calling Governor DeWine, and he changed his phone number on us.
Who scolded me the other day? You didn't see that, did you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I am so upset with him. I really want him and his wife, their next visit, I want them to stay in my home. I asked him, head of the EPA, Alan Shaw. They're saying they don't stay in East Palestine because there's no places for them to stay. I think we should all do Airbnbs for them. I think they should have to sign a release, though. But, they're not going to sue me if they get sick being in my home. But they're going to have to stay in it before I come back to it. But when he was there, I asked how deep they had dug at the tracks. So the next day is when Governor DeWine had told them they had to dig up the tracks. So there was a lot leading up, and a lot came out in that interview that was edited with Fox. So you couldn't hear everything that I was bringing up, but I called several things out, like even with the EPA and the testing and the results not being wrote. And somebody from a company that has been so discredited had to order him to call his supervisor. That was coming out. I had exposed that. And then it was the day that President Trump came into town. I walk up onto my porch, and somebody had placed a tongue on my mom's porch swing and smashed it down to get the blood worked in. And that's what they did. Like we had not been going through enough. The message was, I guess, shut up.
Yeah.
Quit talking. I'm not 100% clear.
Who can
the motivation.
Yeah. But I wanted to mention that only because I did want to bring it up because it's something that happened to you. So we'll move on to something else, because I think that there's a bigger story, and
There's
that
a lot
story.
more. There's people that's speaking out, that's being followed. Um, there has been anti-Semitic flyers and literature left on people's porches and their
Can you
mailboxes.
imagine the heat I'm taking because I was doing creek videos?
Yeah,
I mean, wouldn't you want to know that there's horrible contamination in your creek when you're being
yeah,
told it's about the point where you can put water and drink right out of the creek now? You're being
yeah,
told that.
yeah.
And so, um,
I don't know why they're not thanking you.
well, I'm not looking for that, but I'm just
No,
saying as
but
an
they should
example.
be. I thanked you for being able. If it wasn't for you, I would never to this day have testing done to see if I have a chemical in me or
Yeah,
not.
and those results aren't back yet. I will tell you that the third person tested positive today. So I'll be interviewing him later.
Yes.
And that's for vinyl chloride. So to that point, all the refusals to test, of the few people that got tested, there are so many people that are testing positive. What if they tested from the beginning, this whole town?
Yeah.
What would have happened? And that should be ongoing right now because it's due to chronic exposure. The urine test,
Yeah.
the chronic exposure shows up as you're in your surroundings, and it's in your ductwork and it's on your walls. So somebody that might not test positive today, as they're in their home for another 6 months, as the
Yeah.
vinyl chloride builds up in your body, you can start peeing it out.
Yeah.
But okay, so you are displaced still in Columbiana. And
Yes.
tell me what are your plans? What's going on? And Norfolk Southern is renting. Are they paying for your food? Do they pay for your food or
No,
what happened?
no, because we're able to cook
Okay,
meals as
okay,
a family.
got it,
Again, when we
got it.
were stuck at
In
the
a
hotel,
hotel,
it
yes,
was different. But
difficult.
I
Okay,
haven't even attempted with the food now. The only thing, I used to walk to work, now I have to drive.
got
So
it.
I will be turning gas receipts
Okay,
in. And my family's farther away from their
man, this
school and
like a
jobs.
normal person living a normal life trying to get by. You need this stress where you
Yeah.
have to turn in receipts to a company that, and there's
Yeah.
no, yeah. But anyway, okay. So what are your hopes? What are your, what? Tell me where you are
I
now.
I need a permanent safe home for my family. I don't feel that my mom and stepdad should have to try to take a mortgage at 89 and 82 years old. Their home was paid off. Um, I think that they should replace our home with another home because I'm never going to feel safe there. That was my safe haven. Now, if I go back, I'm going to be wondering every night when I try to sleep, is my daughter or am I going to be diagnosed with cancer next month? This is something that we should have never, as a community, had to ever think about. Nobody should. I know cancer happens, and I know people get that. But knowing that we're just their test rats right now, I mean, that's basically what we are.
And I've concentrated after the fact. There's a lot of people that are investigating what happened, why this accident happened, maybe the negligence of the 30-second car inspections. Now it used to be 8 minutes to
Yeah.
inspect each car. But would it be different if this happened and some noble company came in? They were a noble company and they came and said, "We're going to make." Well, they say we're going to make it right.
Yeah.
But if they truly made it right, if they came in from the very beginning, could this have been a lot different?
Yeah.
Would you,
Yeah. I think if they would have said, you know what, we're setting you up with health care right away. Anything that goes wrong, we're paying for that. It's not like we're a city with 150,000
yeah,
people in it. We're a little village. They have more than enough resources that they could have handled this honestly. Even if they would have said, I don't know, but don't lie to me. Don't lie to me and tell me it's safe
yeah,
when you don't know. I'd rather you say, We don't know.
Or if you know and you're hiding it.
Yes.
Right.
And the cover-ups that has went on through all of this.
Oh, the cover-ups in the creeks.
It's disgusting. It's heartbreaking.
So what would you end this? You talk about your feelings, whatever, is there something that you really want known?
That it could happen to anybody. It could happen to anybody near train tracks. Life is so short, and it is. And home is in here. I've had to take my home and my heart.
You're going to get me. You're going to get me. You got me.
I took my first steps in that house. My daughter took her first steps. I lost my father in that house. I got to see my mother fall in love again after losing dad and remarry in that house. It's an old home. It may not be worth a lot to some people, but it was my home. It was my home, and now it's never going to feel like home anymore. When I go in there, it's so dark. It's like there's a dark presence that's just going all through it.
Somehow, some way, it's going to be okay. And there's going to be better things. You just got to believe that.
God will get us through it.
Yeah.
He has so far. Because I've still got my mom.
Yeah.
And I've still got my stepdad. It's just hard with him with the certain dementia because his short-term memory isn't
and things
really,
are so different for him now in different surroundings.
I tried to. He was getting confused which was their room.
Yeah.
So I got little signs and I wrote like Nan and Bob's room, and then I would write everybody's name and put it, and then I'd write bathroom, and I told him it was for decoration so he wouldn't feel singled out.
Yeah.
And he liked it, and it's helping, but you shouldn't have to be doing that.
Those are the things that you just
be able
don't
to
think
be
about.
in his home that he's familiar with. They don't, when somebody has that, they're so, you don't say, why don't you remember that? You have to make them feel comfortable and like they're very much useful and needed, because depression comes with that. And so I'm just always trying to accommodate and find a way to help him. But what happens when the lease is up in 6 months? Got to take the signs with us, find another home. I just wish that they would talk to me about what their plans are, because I feel like they know what they're going to do. They would have to.
I believe they know. I believe that it's a waiting game. It's like I talked about before, they've got a think tank that has been working on this probably harder than they've been working on the cleanup, on exactly how we're going to,
we definitely know it's harder than the cleanup.
How long we're going to last, how long before it blows over, how long before America's already started to move on. Well, it's already moved on to a lot of other things.
So. Oh, yeah. But, if it wasn't for you and some of the reporters that still are covering, there's maybe one handful. It's sad. It's sad because we're already forgotten about. And the pieces they do, they praise him. I swear that it's not going to surprise me to
praise
come
him,
in.
You mean
Alan Shaw, the railroad, Governor DeWine. I was waiting for a statue of Alan Shaw with a hazmat suit, putting a child with an Easter egg to pop up, over by the community sign. I think probably would explain it best. Maybe they'll take some of the money the city got and put one up for them.
Well, I'm going to end by saying that we are human beings worth something, and we're not couches and furniture and fabric to throw away. So I hope somebody notices that and helps us.
Yeah.
Don't know who that's going to be. Well, thank you.
God knows.
Thank you.
He's
Thank you for
got
doing
us.
the interview.
Thank you.